back with my guest, Dr. Robert P. Murphy, who is the author of The Politically Incorrect Guide to Capitalism. And Dr. Murphy, I want to discuss your book in more detail now. I've started reading it. It's extremely interesting and informative and well-written. But why don't you kind of tell us what motivated you to write a book especially for that series of politically incorrect books?
Well, the premise of the Politically Incorrect Guide series is to be shocking, to make a bunch of statements that on the cover the reader's going to think, oh, how could he possibly say that? But then when you open it and read it, you realize that, no, it's a very factual, very sober analysis, and that these shocking statements are really just due to the fact that people have been misinformed their whole lives, getting from the government school system or from the popular media treatment a lot of these issues. So that's what I try to do in the Politically Incorrect Guide to Capitalism, is just show that a lot of what people think is just standard basic truth about the capitalist system isn't true. For example, that the capitalist system didn't cause the Great Depression, that it's not true that there would be rampant discrimination in a free market. It's not true that the poor do worse under capitalism than they do under socialism, or that the free market would hurt the environment. These things are all false, and I can do it in terms of economic theory, but then I also just give historical examples and evidence just to show that if you just open your eyes and look around, it's obvious that the Western countries are better to their environments than the former communist countries are.
Well, one thing I've been very concerned about, I've voted Republican for years because I thought that they were the party that supported free markets, but I am seeing that many of them support some of the fallacies of central planning in many areas, such as the monetary system, and just what we were talking about, the mortgage system, and now we have a president who's engaging in Keynesian economics with this economic stimulus of sending people checks. How have those of us who are Republican and consider ourselves conservative gone astray with these basic free market economic ideas by rejecting these basic economic free market economic ideas?
Well, yeah, that's a good point you raise. It's really ironic that if you just look in terms of budgets, that it was actually under Bill Clinton that the federal budget was briefly in surplus, and at least in terms of the accounting that they use, even under him, government debt still went up every year. But even on the government's own terms, that we had deficits under Reagan and then the two Bushes, and under Clinton we actually had a surplus. And so I think a lot of it's just that you can't look to politicians, of course, as the people to really uphold your ideals, that if you are a believer in limited government, that, reading economists and reading political philosophers, that's where you get your information from. And, if you've got any political party that's controlling all the branches of government, they're going to spend money. I mean, that's just a popular thing to do, and that's the way you keep the constituents happy. So I'm not too optimistic about major political parties changing their views and really reining in the growth of government. I mean, you're asking the politicians to reduce their own power base, and I don't think that's going to happen unless people really demand change.
Well, one area, in your book, do you address health care?
I do a little bit.
So tell us something about what the state of health care is with regard to free market analysis, because that's one thing I practice in. I represent Medicare, Medicaid providers in regulatory actions that the government takes against them. And to me, any of the problems that I see in the health field, I think are directly related to programs such as this. Is this something that you address in your book, or that perhaps your analysis in your book would actually cover?
Yeah, well, I do touch on that a little bit in the book. It's I agree with you. I think if you want to say, why is it in the computer industry we have all this innovation and prices keep coming down, in the sense that, what does it cost for a kilobyte of RAM, or how much for a certain amount of room on your hard drive, that unit price keeps coming down, so that for the same amount of money you just keep getting a better and better model. Whereas in healthcare, it's true the services you get are getting better and better each year, but the costs are just going through the roof. And even if you try to adjust and say, for the same type of service, why does it keep getting more expensive? I think the difference is that you don't have this third-party payment system set up in healthcare, in the computer industry, the way you do in healthcare. And you can say, well, why did that happen? There's all sorts of reasons, but part of it was the wage and price controls going back to World War II. That's why employers started offering health insurance to their employees, because the government made it illegal to offer them more money in terms of salary. So the employers, to attract talent, said, okay, well, we'll pay your health benefits. And so right there, that was a major government intervention that all of a sudden perverted the markets. And now, I mean, why is it that your health care is associated with your job? Why is that the case? Well, it's because of a lot of government interventions that lock that into place. Certain tax code treatments also reinforce that, so that it makes more sense for you to get health care funneled through your employer. And so now you're in a situation where if someone quits or loses his job, he might not be able to get health care for his family.
Right, and isn't that a basic supply and demand type situation that drives the price up? Because if with people not spending their own money on health care, they're consuming a lot more health care than they would if they were paying for it, and that drives prices up.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten to the point where people don't even think it's real. When you if you have to go to the emergency room for some reason, and you get the bill, and you look at what it costs, what the hospital's saying it costs, and then you just say, okay, yeah, but insurance, now how much do I owe? I mean, people don't even think that that's real, that number, but that really is a real number, and that's, as you say, because people aren't paying it out of pocket. They think it's free. They think it doesn't count, and that is because there's this giant third-payer system, whereas if everyone just got paid their paychecks and they went out and they shopped around for health care the way they shop around for a car or for computers, you would find costs would be a lot more reasonable.
Well, let's talk about another issue that I know you do address in the book, and that's the environment. And I think that's particularly relevant now because our Republican frontrunner has decided to make that one of his issues. And of course, he's a man who's never had a job in the private sector except for 1 year of his life, and who insulted Romney because Romney had a job in the private sector where he made profits. I guess he's buying into this myth that freedom and capitalism cause pollution. What is the real story there?
Well, you're right. I was concerned that during the primaries that McCain was just so flippantly castigating someone for making his money in the private sector, and that generally speaking, as long as there wasn't fraud involved, I mean, someone should be applauded for becoming rich, serving his customers. But as far as the environment goes, it's like I say, if you don't take my word for it, just think about it. I mean, people who have visited other countries, I mean, the former Soviet Union, those areas were heavily polluted. Those rivers just had all sorts of things dumped into them because the communist governments there cared more about material progress than they did about the welfare of their citizens. And it just, the richer countries become, the more they can afford to be environmentally friendly. And so that's why it's precisely in the very industrialized, rich countries of the West that you have an environmental movement, is because we can afford to have that luxury. We're not worried about day-to-day survival.
Exactly. And why don't you tell everybody where they can get your book, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Capitalism?
Well, you can get it on Amazon.com, or major booksellers should be carrying it still.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being with us. This was very informative and very educational and interesting. Thanks for being with us today, Dr. Murphy.
Thanks for having me, Jerry.
Okay. It's Jerri Ward back with the last segment of I Object, Justice Examined. And like I told everybody at the very beginning, my show is now going to be on twice a month. And so at the same, on Thursdays, beginning at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So I hope everybody will tune in and listen. We're going to have more great guests like I just had, and we're going to continue discussing not only legal issues, which when I first conceived of this show, I thought I'd be talking a lot, but also the economy, because I think the economy has hit the forefront of Americans, the conscience of Americans, as we're seeing the results of a decade of really bad behavior by the Federal Reserve, like Dr. Murphy talked about what Greenspan did, that kicked off this mortgage crisis, and the continuing efforts by the Federal Reserve that, in my opinion, are going to do nothing but exacerbate the situation and are going to be useless to financial solvency. I mean, Bernanke has already admitted that all they can deal with is liquidity. They can't do anything about solvency. What we need in this country is capital formation. We need the government to stand aside and to let some of these banks take their lumps, and then start on a traditional basis of sound money, thrift, hard work, and not try all these little tricks like this thing that the Federal Reserve came up with back late last year that we just talked about, that's called the term auction facility. I looked that up in Wikipedia, and this is a so-called new tool that they came up with in December. It's not going to work. It's going to make things worse. So everyone, join me for more information about this topic and other important topics when I return in about 2 weeks for another show of I Object, Justice Examined. And I'll try to let everybody know in advance on my website at www.jerrylynnward.com what that's going to be. So come on back and listen to I Object, Justice Examined.
This is Right Talk Radio.